Welcome to Marcy Bond's Publishing Lounge. Today is March 10th, 2016. I am Marcy Bond, and I am CEO and founder of Wild Child Publishing in Freyas-Bauer. And today I have two guests, both erotic romance authors, Molly Daniels, who's also known as Kenzie Michaels, and Dorothy Bell. So welcome, and I'd like both of you to introduce yourselves, one at a time, of course. Would you like to...
You first, Kenzie.
Okay. I'm Kenzie Michaels. Kenzie's my wild child, and I write adult contemporary fiction, and I've also ventured into sci-fi, contemporary sci-fi romance, so which is a total different genre, and we're muddling through it. But I do have, I think I'm working on, between the two pen names, I think I have a total of 19 books under my belt now.
Wow.
Which is pretty good since you very generously took me on, 6 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. I could look to be sure, but
2009, so maybe.
Yeah, almost 7.
Yeah.
And Dorothy?
I write Oregon historical. Mainly I stay within the state no matter what I write. I do have one contemporary novel out, a new release called Reinventing Micah Avery, but the other 3 novels are Oregon. They take places in places where I've lived and where we've traveled about and searched out roads and names and a little bit of history. I will stay in romance. I read romance. I write romance. I don't seem to be able to do anything else. I throw in a little bit of mystery and a little bit of tension in my stories. I like old westerns. I like Stagecoach and High Noon, and all of those old westerns are my favorite thing. So I pretty much stay within that storytelling bracket. The one that I find entertaining is what I like to write.
Well, I understand that. I don't really, occasionally I write, but most of my stuff has romance in it. It isn't always necessarily strictly romance. And even some stuff that I originally started writing as romance became something else entirely. Do you ever find that happening with you, Dorothy, that you'll start writing actually both of you, but that you'll start writing and you think the story's going to go one way and then it turns and does something else entirely?
Oh, all the time. All the time, unfortunately. They all take on a life of their own. And not always is the leading character turns out to be the leading character. It turns out to be someone else entirely. I had a very difficult time letting go of Buck Hoyt in Dance Hall Road. The stories that are following Dance Hall Road, the follow-up stories that I've got in mind for that, he comes up every time being a very strong character in there, and it's not my intent. He's supposed to be secondary, but he comes out as a primary a lot of times. I have to tamp him down a little bit and stick him in the background every once in a while, tell him to butt it out. And go back out.
And you, Molly?
I understand that totally. I had my first book that was published with you, All She Ever Wanted. Someone had emailed me saying they wanted to know more about a secondary character. So I started writing his story when all of a sudden, out of the blue, a character from another story that I had written, totally unrelated to this now series, all of a sudden jumps in and says, "Hey, you need to write my story. You need to tell the backstory of how I won the lottery and created this fictional country club / teenage hangout place." And next thing I know, I went from a standalone to a trilogy in the blink of an eye, without even planning it.
Right.
Well, that book that I was telling you about, one of them, the one that we spoke about earlier, The Whispering House, that is going to be released sometime this month or so, I keep saying, that it started out as a chapter book series. And I would write 3 chapters and then we'd release it. So it was one of those, we were trying out chapter books to see how it would work. And it started out as an erotic romance. And then at some point, they just left me and the characters were unhappy, or I don't know. And I had nothing to write and I got really busy doing other stuff. And then when I came back to sit down and write it, it turned from a erotic romance, contemporary romance with some paranormal elements, to primarily like a paranormal thriller with some sex scenes in it that are integral to the story. If you pulled them out, the story would have issues, but it's no longer really like it has romance in it, but that's not what drives it through. And, and Kenzie was saying how she's been stuck. Part of the reason she's been stuck on this one book that she's writing is the characters just aren't speaking more than a couple lines to her. And it could have something to do with maybe those 2 characters don't really want to be together.
Or maybe they just ran off to Jamaica and left me. I don't know.
I ran off to Jamaica.
I'm taking too long to write it.
One thing
Kenzie,
that I did I couldn't get in touch with the heroine in Dance Hall Road. She just didn't have any substance for me. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't figure out who the heck she was or what she looked like, or she just didn't take shape. I changed her hair color and her eyes, and all of a sudden she became a person for me. Someone that I knew and that I recognized and that I could empathize with. And all it took was basically just changing how they looked and what their shape was. Sometimes a character isn't who I think they are, and they don't speak to me.
Yeah.
But if I tweak them just a little bit, I can see them better. It's like living with a ghost in your head. They don't take shape. They're in the dark. They're kind of fuzzy. But if you give them a little bit better distinction, something about them brings them forward a little bit better, and then you get better acquainted with them.
That's true, because when I started to write Class Reunion, which was the sequel, I started writing about the character Brian, and it just wasn't going anywhere. Well, then I actually went to that year I had 2 class reunions to go to, and I found out when you tell your old friends you're a writer and alcohol's involved, all of a sudden people tend to tell you things. I came away from that second class reunion with a little more knowledge of people that I hadn't seen in a long time and probably should not know about. But I started to pick and choose, certain secrets which had been divulged, and changing the details, and of course, to protect the not so innocent. And all of a sudden, boom, Brian just took off and told me everything that he wanted to say, and the story was born.
Right. It's funny how that happens. Do you find, for instance, like when I sat down to try to figure out what I wanted the cover art to look like, I empathize with authors who do this all the time, because it becomes a struggle, especially because we have a very distinct idea of who these characters are in our head, and then trying to find someone who looks like that character. It becomes really difficult unless you have a lot of money to spend to find a model that looks exactly like them, or models that do. And I realized that I got stuck on as the main character of The Whispering House didn't see herself as attractive. But how many of us view ourselves as attractive. And when I finally got past that, well, you know what? I can pick a model that I find to be attractive, because even though she doesn't find herself to be attractive, that's probably not even true. Does that make sense? Because we frequently look in the mirror and we're like, oh my God, I should have just stayed in bed and kept the covers over my head. So do you find that to be the same type of thing, as where it's hard to find the characters or models that even look remotely close to who your characters are?
Oh, yes, definitely. There's no doubt about it. Covers are the most difficult thing, and you want it to be something that the cover to be something that somebody's going to stop and take a second look at. And a lot of times, if you make it unattractive or unappealing in some way, people walk on by. And especially with ebooks, it's very difficult to come up with a cover that people will stop and take a second glance at. Ebooks are easily just passed over like popcorn.
Exactly. I've been very blessed in the cover art gods, because I think there's only been one or two that I've actually said no to, and then maybe, okay, can you reverse their positions or something like that? You know, I think one of my covers, the characters are just looking at you, or no, I know what it was. One picture had the female had her back to the camera with her arm around the hero when he had his hand down by his side. And I was like, no, that just doesn't look, it looked flat. So then the cover artist found another picture of them facing the camera side by side, and that worked a lot better. So I haven't had too much of an issue with my cover artists getting the hair color or, certain features right or wrong. They've just come together, and pretty much my first impression is, oh, I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
delighted.
I had a real challenge with the most recent one, Mr. Hotness, and I finally just decided on a hot guy, a bare-chested hot guy, because I just couldn't find what I was looking for. So I guess I'm picky. And not that you guys aren't picky, but it's like the character's like, no. So do I have 20 hours to be going through all of these photos in order to find the perfect one? And I may not even find the perfect one. So
on Reinventing Micah Avery, the hero, we'll call him a hero, he wears shorts all the time. There was cut off jeans all the time. There were absolutely no pictures of guys in cut off jeans. And the ones that did have cut off jeans, they were the baggy ones that hang down below their butt, It was the skateboard baggy thing. And that's not what this guy was wearing. He wears Levi's, and they're just cut off. And there was there are none. I like you say, Marcy, I'd have to hire a model and cut off his jeans and take a picture of him in order to get what I wanted. So comes a point when it's just like, this is close enough. This is good. And you take that, and you're very happy, and you go with it, and it works, because cut off jeans only means something to me. It doesn't mean anything to the reader, probably. It's just one of those foibles that you give your character. That's what he does.
Well, cut-off jeans make me think of the 70s, to be honest. You don't see very many people wearing them anymore, but I remember wearing them, and I remember people wearing them in the 70s, although I was a little kid. But
well, where came up at where it was that we were having a house built, and our contractor wore cut-off jeans every day, and it was March, and it was cold, and it was raining, and he wore cut-off jeans, and that's all he wore, and he was a darn good-looking guy, I gotta tell you. So it stuck in my mind, and it was one of the things I wanted to give my character was this thing that they do, and it really worked for him. I'm gotta tell you.
Well, I've got to say that usually construction workers are not what you would see on TV. So
No, they're not.
I'm actually married to one, so I can attest that.
So you can attest that
Yes.
that he's good looking, right?
Yeah.
Yes. 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 Oh.
I wondered if Kenzie has the same problem. Oh, excuse me.
I said he's not model worthy, but he's easy on the eyes.
I wanted to ask Kenzie if she has the same problem with the word erotica that I do. I've come up to me and I say I write romance, erotica, romance, and oh, you write those smutty books. Well, I don't consider romance smutty. So I'm wondering if you have the same problem.
Well, I jokingly tell people that I write young adult smut and adult smut. So
So you just go with it. Okay.
yeah. I mean, when Marcy first offered my first contract, my daughter was online, and I had her tab over to check my email, and that's when I saw that all she ever wanted had been accepted. And so my daughter flips back to her email, brings up an instant message, and goes, "Cool, Mom's porn's going to be published." And I'm like, "It's not porn."
Wow, that looks really
Well,
good.
I get very frustrated because a lot of the well-known authors put a lot more graphic sex in their books than I do, but they're not considered erotica. I resent it. I let's label it like it's supposed to be labeled and put erotica on their stuff too.
Well, I mean, it's romance, and the only way
I write adult contemporary. So I use adult contemporary when I tell people.
That's a good way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely wouldn't give mine to at least the Mr. Hotness or the Whispering House to children or teenagers, for that matter.
Yeah, I see that distinction definitely. I had a niece who was 15 and 16, and her mom, of course, wanted to read the books, which was great, but it probably wasn't appropriate for the niece to read it, at least not at that point in time. She's 18 and 19 now. She can go right ahead.
Although, when I was like 15 and 16, I was reading some of those bodice rippers. So,
oh no, definitely
12. So
me too.
So it's kind of funny what we think is okay for them to read and not okay for them to read, but what we read.
Exactly. I was reading forever at like 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
But I let my daughter. She was 14 at the time. I let her read all she ever wanted, and she, I think she read it in a couple hours, and she handed it back and said, "It's a good story, Mom, but I've read worse at school." So I was like, "Oh, good, I'm on the team side."
Yes.
Okay.
My cat is demanding attention.
Oh.
Well,
I make PG versions for my mother, but apparently I didn't PG class reunion enough, and she was fanning herself when she came back.
Yeah, class reunion is not PG.
She said, "That's cleaned up. Whew, that was hot." And I'm like, "Seriously? I took out all the F words." I kind of cleaned it up a lot, Mom.
Uh-oh. Hey! I'm sorry, the cats. Stop it.
Well, I've definitely embarrassed my children, and they're almost 50, so that's good. I like that too. It works for me. It's always good to embarrass the kids. I kind of go for it.
Yeah, my mom, if I, she won't. She won't read them because they're ebooks and she doesn't read ebooks. And she doesn't really read fiction, to be perfectly honest. She reads a lot of nonfiction, more about health and that kind of stuff. And when I have read a few passages aloud to her, she gets red, and but she's almost 80, and it's not that she doesn't know what goes on. but it's, it I don't know. She's like, Marcy, I can't believe you wrote that.
That's what my mom says. Although my mother was a high school nurse for 30 years, and one day we were in one of the steakhouses, and I was telling her about a book that I'd written, or a book that I'd read by another author, and a woman comes out of the stall and says, "Oh, I'd like to know the name of that book." So while I was telling her, I had my business cards in my back pocket, so I whipped her out and I said, I'm a published author also. And she's like, okay, so what do you write? So we got into a discussion about that. Well, then all of a sudden the toilet flushes. My mother comes out of the stall and says, I think your book should, this is my mom Daniel's sweet romance line. She said, I think your book should be required reading for all high school seniors. If you would just take out those bad words. And I'm like, Mom, college kids do not swear gee whiz golly gee. When they get away from home, they're drunk. They make a sailor look. They swear and make a sailor blush.
Yes, they do. They do. I didn't swear that much, but that was just me. But I know a lot of people who did, and I tend to swear more in the car.
My vocabulary cleaned up about my third year of college, but so I'm no stranger to some of the words.
I tell people I don't swear, characters do all the time.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I heard my parents swear, I was in college, and we were on the golf course. And if you guys know anything about golf, it can make anybody swear. And I remember my dad said the F word and threw his club. He was so mad. It was, when I say it was awesome, it was just hilarious because we were at this country club, and a very uptight country club, and here's my dad swearing, yelling the F word and throwing his club, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is just awesome.
Well, I agree. Golf requires swearing. I think it's probably you have to know how in order to play golf. I don't think you can play golf without swearing. It's sort of like the computer. You have to swear at the computer. This thing is annoying.
It's certainly swearing at mine earlier.
That's very true. I would agree. So your kids still wear cut off jeans, Kenzie?
Well, my 12-year-old does. When his jeans wear out, I just cut him off at the knee and he wears them for shorts.
I did that with my daughter because she was so tall. I mean, she got so tall but it still fit her around the waist. So they'd gotten really short and they were getting tight on her legs. So we cut the jeans off, and boy, did she love those shorts. They were great.
Yes, my granddaughter's turning 3, and we haven't had to do that for her yet, but I'm sure there will come a day when she'll be thrilled when mommy or grandma cuts her blue jean pants and turns them into shorts.
Well, it's a good way to get more wear out of the clothes.
Exactly. And when you're on a limited budget, then that's what you got to do.
Well, she just happened to love these jeans. I had taken them. They were blue jeans, but they had roses on them, white roses. And then I took them and I threw them in dark green dye. And so then the roses became these dark green roses, and it was actually very, very pretty. And so she really liked them. And I thought, well, they're just not long enough and they're tight in the legs, but they fit her else otherwise. So I cut them off. And I find that's the case with her. She's pretty, she's a bit, she's thin. And so a lot of times, by the time the pants actually fit her around the waist, if they're going to be jeans, she's grown out of the legs, and then the waist fits her. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. So
Right, you got to make them go as far as you can.
Yeah.
Pedal pushers and push-ups and clam diggers are good too.
Oh yes. My daughter laughed at me when because I had a pair of jeans that I called my clam diggers, and she goes, "Aren't those capris?" Well, yeah, clam diggers, capris, whatever.
Same difference.
Yeah. Well, just depends on what decade you grew up in.
Well, I've never.
Yeah, I'm glad they came back in style.
I like capris. I've never heard of them called clam diggers, but I can see why they would be. And I like pedal pushers. The pedal pushers are longer, and the clam diggers are shorter, correct? The capri, I think the capris are just below the knees.
And tighter usually. Usually they fit snug. Yeah.
The ones I called my clam diggers kind of hit more like around the calf.
Yeah, I mean, they're a little bit lower than that, but they're not as low as the pedal pushers, which are only like a few inches above your ankles.
Oh.
I think. Isn't that what pedal pushers are?
We'll have to look up what. Yeah, we're going to have to do research on this.
This is it's a fascinating conversation about pants.
Could be an argument. Yes, I know.
Mama.
Well, there you go. So, what inspired you to write historical romance, and why did you branch off into contemporary, Dorothy?
Well, the historical romances are my entertainment, and I love them so much. And I was inspired to write them by things I had found out. The Blue Mountains over in Oregon have a lot of history in them, in that the Oregon Trail right across them. And there was a spot, Highway 84. It's called Dead Man Pass right to this day. And there are several different stories about how it came to be named Dead Man Pass. But from a very old timer over there told us that the story that they put in the books is incorrect, and his story was that the Oregon Trail went right through the Indians' natural trail, and they didn't like it that all of these wagon trains were using that trail. So they found a guy hauling freight and pinned him and hung him up over the trail, and he was dead, of course, and that was to discourage people from going across that trail. But it didn't, of course. We're very arrogant. We just go wherever we want to, and so it didn't work. And they build a highway over it today, so that shows you how much we paid attention to that kind of.
Yeah.
But anyway, I found that fascinating, and also I have a photograph of a woman that was given to me by one of my aquatic exercise students, and it was a lady in a long tan duster standing beside a covered wagon, and she was in Oklahoma, and she was delivering home goods out in the Oklahoma Territory in the late 1900s, all by herself. And she had 7 children, and her husband ran the store, and she hauled the merchandise around to her customers. And she was a tiny little thing, and that's where the Laura Creek Mercantile came up. This woman goes up and starts her own mercantile up there. And of course, the boys, I know men like that, and so it wasn't hard to find examples of those people. I already know those guys. Then Dance Hall Road, there is a Dance Hall Road out by Baker City. It's about 25 miles outside of town between Baker City and Hell's Canyon. and it's called Dance Hall Road, and it doesn't go anywhere, and it dead ends out there, and there are no buildings, and there's nothing out there. There's also a virgin flat very close by, and that required a story. That really does. A lot of Basque sheep herders were out in Baker City herding huge flocks of sheep for a number of years while they were having difficulty in Spain. There were a lot of Basque sheep herders out there. And, of course, the wagon trains came down in through that part of Oregon and over to Baker City. And there are a lot of hot springs out there. So I just put it all together in Dance Hall Road. The contemporary story, Reinventing Micah Avery, was a story that I had on the back burner for a number of years. My husband's parents passed away very close together, and his mom was ill, and his dad passed away, and they thought that his mom should be able to take care of his dad at home, and his dad was difficult, to say the least, and we went through a lot of trouble with that, and it's about parents and children who have to come in and take care of and tidy up after parents pass away, and you learn a lot of things that you had no clue that when they were younger they did this and that and the other thing, and they felt this way and that way, and they had huge passions, and we had no clue about them, and that's what inspired me to write Reinventing Micah Avery. It's actually a more or less biographical account of my husband's parents passing away. But I fictionalized it, and hopefully, like Kenzie says, to protect the guilty. Let's hope so. We'll see. And it was in a small town, of course.
What's interesting is I have this desk that started out as my grandma's, and then it was my mom's, and then it's been mine for a long time. And I just never really, I thought everything, all of the stuff that was in the desk was actually mine, because I'd had it through college and all the way through, so I just assumed everything was in there was mine. And I went through it, I think like 3 or 4 years ago, and was just cleaning stuff out. It's like, okay, I have letters that were written to me, I don't know how long ago. You know what I mean? I don't need to keep all of these letters anymore. And I ran across a love letter from my mom to my dad that he had kept. Aww. And, well, yeah, they wrote spicy stuff back then. I'm like, Mom, what does this mean? And she's like, oh my goodness, you found that? So I gave it back to her. I said, do you want, I hope she didn't burn it, because, you know, I mean, I remember writing some spicy love letters to boyfriends back when you did that, when there was no email. And getting some spicy letters from boyfriends as well. So,
yeah, and you had no clue that they could be spicy, and that they were. They had a lot of. I mean, this erotica has been going on a very long time.
Centuries.
Way back.
One of the funniest things we ever heard was at a Christmas party. My grandmother had found the stack of the letters that she and my grandfather had she had from my grandfather back when he was stationed at Midway during World War II. And she's reading along, and all of a sudden, or I guess my aunt had picked up one of the letters, and there came the line, next time I see you, I hope we won't hurt your knee. And all of a sudden, my grandmother just turned bright red, and we're like, ooh, that must not be, you know, what happened to your knee, Grandma? And she just got bright red and thought, okay, that must be what they called it back then. And we never could get her to fess up to what it was.
Of course not.
You know.
Well, many years ago, there's a story in my family of my grandma, and my grandma was she was a Bible thumping Baptist, and her father was he was so Bible thumping that he thought that music and dancing and drinking were sins. Mind you, my grandmother later discovered that he had a wife, another wife up in Oregon, and a couple of children that he left up there before he married my grandma, my great grandmother, not my grandma, but my great grandmother. And of course, my great grandmother didn't know about it. And
So do you suppose you two are related?
pardon?
So do you suppose you two are related?
I don't know. My family were some of the original founders of Oregon. So through my mom's line, and so they could have certainly known some of your family, Dorothy. But
Right.
And they could have there could have been one of the gazillion children that married. Because it seemed like they had gazillions of children, and
They do have gazillions.
and there's a story about my grandma who I guess she didn't realize that she outlived her first husband, and then she married. She outlived my grandfather, and then she married again. And there's a story that they had come. One of the family members was there visiting, and grandma didn't know that they were there or something, and they're in the bed. She's in the bedroom with my grandpa Clark, and she says, "I'm a ready Teddy." And we're like, "Oh my God, grandma!" And you're like, okay. So there's all these stories. You wouldn't think that of this woman who was very, like I said, she was a Bible thumping Baptist. So you just wouldn't expect that.
I have found that the Bible thumping Baptists are very passionate people.
Well, that I do. Yeah, she was very passionate about her religion.
They're passionate in every sense of the word.
Well, no, but I mean, as far as we knew, that she was very passionate about her religion. So, but it was just very. I'm sure she's rolling in her grave because I've told this story and it's recorded and it'll be up on the internet.
I remember quite clearly being evicted from my mother and father's bedroom. There were 6 of us, and I was in a little crib in my mother and father's bedroom until I reached the age of maybe 2.5 or 3. And I remember quite distinctly why that happened. There was noise going on in the bed, and I jumped up and down in the crib and wanted to know what they were doing over there. And I think the very next day I was transferred upstairs to sleep with my sister, who wasn't happy about that because I did wet the bed and she didn't like that.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure she wouldn't like that at
But
all.
I was evicted from Mom and Dad's bedroom, and I remember quite distinctly, and it didn't occur to me until I was a teenager why I was evicted from that bedroom.
Well, my sister remembers something that I have no memory of, but apparently she came home. We always knew that Saturday mornings we were to fend for ourselves. Mom and Dad's bedroom door was locked. Well, apparently my sister came home from a sleepover, and she heard noises coming from the bedroom. She heard noises coming from the other end of the house, and apparently she started screaming, what's going on? And according to her, I came out of my room and said, "They're having sex, stupid," and then walked back into my room. I have no memory of this. Because my room was right next to Mom and Dad, so I knew every time they had, I knew what was going on.
Well, I think with more modern times, even though they were kind of prudish back then, there were certain things that they just knew because they lived in very close quarters
Right.
So you couldn't, and they had so many children, you couldn't get away from,
No.
the facts of life. So, I mean, my daughter and I have been reading about the houses that they had in colonial times and the very first houses, and the fact that most of them slept all in the same room and
On the
continued to
floor,
produce children. Oh yeah,
on the floor.
and they continued to produce children. So that's it. But now, I remember when Charlie, we had talked about having a second child, and he was, well, our house really isn't big enough to have a second child because our daughter would have to share a room, and I shared a room when I was a kid. I mean, why does she need to have her own room? These houses are very small where we live. They're built in the 1940s. So, pardon? Because I'm sorry, I just leaned in. My daughter asked me, why wouldn't I have to have my own room? Because if there's not anywhere else to put the child, you share a room. That's just how it goes.
Closet or share a room. I don't care.
That's right. That's
But
right.
I was the youngest of 6 children, so they get very pragmatic by the time you get down to 6. It's like if you don't like it, that's tough.
Yeah.
And you take what you can get, and you're great.
Yeah, I was the youngest of 4. It was very similar.
Right. You very quietly go along with the crowd, and you're happy that everybody leaves you alone. Is great.
Yeah, that's true. Now,
Well, about 10 years ago, we took in my niece's 2 children who were 2 years older than my youngest. And so the only place we had to put them was on the floor of the baby's room. And so we suddenly went from a family of 3 to a family of 5. Well, 2006, we ended up moving down to my mother-in-law's house. So we went from a 4-bedroom house down to a 2-bedroom, but we still brought everybody with us. And so the boys have the bedroom, and my daughter has a room set up in what used to be the dining room and is now the combination office toy room in her bedroom. And but the niece and nephews, our 2 older grandchildren, don't live with us now, but they still come to visit. And so sometimes it's a challenge finding a place for everyone to sleep. But Ariel, she was adamant she wants to come for spring break, and she said, I don't care if I have to sleep on the cot or in Uncle Dan's chair, but I am coming spring break.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Well, whenever we had visitors, we gave up our beds. We'd have friends of the family who would come over, and they were adults, and I would end up sleeping upstairs on the floor or on the couch or whatever was available. My parents had a pretty good sized house, and at one point, when all of the family came, one of my aunts and uncles came down with an RV. And then another one, and all of us kids would just sleep on the floor in the living room or sleep upstairs on it, which was a kind of a den, and we would sleep up there, and all the adults got the beds, and the kids got the floor, and you made do. You didn't, and it was kind of fun because it was like having a sleepover.
Oh,
yeah, one great big slumber party.
Cousins are never happy, though. I remember sleeping with cousins on the floor, and it's always, I don't know, there's always a problem with it. It's never a happy situation. Somebody's going to end up mad, I can tell you right now. You do get over it, but there's always a problem with it. There's jealousies going on, and I want to sleep with so-and-so, and I want to sleep this way and that way, and she took my pillow, and I don't know, it goes on and on and on throughout the night. But yes, you give up your bed, especially if there are other adults. You give up your bed and they sleep in there. We recently downsized considerably from over a 900 square foot house to a 352 square foot tiny home. And we've talked about where we're going to put people if they come to visit. And I think they're all discouraged. I haven't heard anybody mention that they're going to come visit. But yes, we would have to give them our bed, and Mike and I would come out here and sleep on the floor with the dog and the cat. The dog and the cat have lots of room. They enjoy our little house.
Dorothy, how many kids do you have?
I have just two. I have two children. They're, like I said, they're almost 50. They're 46, 47, respectively, 49, somewhere around there. I think one of them's going to be 50 pretty soon, but I stopped keeping track of how old he is. If he turns 50, I'm no longer paying any attention to that. Too bad about him getting so old, sort of thing. But they live probably about 60 miles away, which is perfect. It's not so close we're in their backyard, but it's good enough so we can see one another within an hour's time, which is great.
Yeah. I joked when my mother had a health scare a couple of years ago, she was calling my sister who lives in Canada because she knew that my sister couldn't just, be at mom's side in an instant. I was getting oh, yes, I'm fine because I'm only 3 hours away. She knew if she mentioned that something was wrong, I could be up there in 3 hours. So I wasn't getting the full story, but my sister was. But I think mom's having a problem. She's having an issue with me turning 50 this year. So I know you can't possibly be that old.
No.
Well, my mom is turning 80 this year at some point. This year. And she said, if you throw me an 80th birthday party, I will kill you. And I said, how about a family reunion? As long as there's no cake for me,
right.
I will do a family reunion. Okay, we'll do a family reunion.
Great. Yeah, that's great. That's a good way to look at it. Just bring everybody together and don't mention the B word.
She said, well, we'll be up earlier, a few days early before the family reunion starts because I want to at least have dinner with my mom on her birthday. So, I don't want her to be alone. Yeah. So. Well,
it does get to be a matter of getting closer. One of the reasons why we moved from Central Oregon back over to the Willamette Valley is that you have to cross a pass to get to Redmond from the valley. And that pass, a lot of times, is not a happy thing. And because of it, we weren't spending holidays together or anything. And at this point in time, it's kind of nice to every once in a while see one another and go have lunch or do something or go shopping together or something. So,
yeah. By the way, I believe the Willamette Valley is where my family is from, that area.
Oh, yeah.
So, Calvin Pell was Pell. And it's even listed in a book about the founders of Oregon.
Okay.
We're not talking about the Native American Indians. We're talking about the Europeans.
About a settler.
Yes, about the settlers coming in. So, So do you find that does any of this stuff that we've been talking about influence or trickle into your books?
Oh, I find it definitely. A lot of things trickle into my books. Some of the antics that Mike's granddad got up to, and the stories he would tell. He played the fiddle, and he called it square dances in Eastern Oregon. And some of the stuff that he used to talk about were just outrageous. He started work when he was 13, quit school, and and he married Mike's grandmother, who was a school teacher. Very, very pretty, lovely woman. And here's Grandpa, rough sheep herder type, but he could spout poetry and play the fiddle and sing. And I'm pretty sure she just fell in love just instantly. It was just one of those things. His education didn't matter, and you can see it in his letters that he can't spell and he doesn't write very well. But it doesn't really matter. The tenderness is there, and yes, those things come out in my stories with the rough types who end up with some woman who's very refined and educated, and of course they feel inferior, but she makes them feel superior in so many ways, and that's an important dynamic in a story, is to have your characters complement one another, make each other better. I believe that is important in a relationship between characters. They have to improve each other's personality, their outlook on life, make them better people, is what I like to do.
Definitely. My social work background comes into mine. It never fails. For instance, the current sci-fi book that I'm in the process of getting published, all of a sudden she is my aliens on Earth. She's inhabiting this abandoned house, and all of a sudden, two homeless people enter downstairs, and throughout the story, she ends up taking care of them. And all of a sudden, by the end of the story, she's pretty much running a homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting how something just come in and take over, and all of a sudden you're like, wow.
Yeah.
And even in Teacher's Pet, I used it for a NaNoWriMo. Yeah.
Right. Rimo. NaNoWriMo.
I had to expand it, so all of a sudden sexual harassment came into. The teacher was one of the mothers of one of the students accused the teacher of sexual harassment. So I had to stop and do some brief research, because I knew a little bit, but I didn't know anything about how, the dynamics of that would play out between a teacher and a parent and student and everything else. So, yeah, it's just little things. All of a sudden, someone will say something, and then boom, the social issue will just drop right in there.
Well, how sci-fi is this new book that you're working on? Because is it a soft sci-fi, or because a lot of time people who read hard sci-fi really want hard, they want all of that information, the science behind everything.
I got into it's funny, because if you watched Star Trek Deep Space Nine, you will definitely recognize the space station in book 3, which came out last fall. I have 2 planets that are coexisting in a pretty much an armed truce. They dislike each other, but they manage to coexist peacefully. And so I think there's enough of it in there. There's not a lot of the sci-fi, the basic. I'm not a science geek by any means, but hopefully there's enough in there too that if someone who reads sci-fi won't tear me to shreds when they finish reading it just by saying I got everything wrong. So, but it's sci-fi. It takes place in space. Some of it takes place in space. Sometimes it takes place on Earth. And I just kind of make it up as I go along. And the most challenging part was when I had to actually sit down and create the Bible, so that from book to book to book, everything was the same. And even spellings of names got switched around. Final edits, we had to go through and double and triple check every page to make sure I didn't change, the spelling or any of their alien language that trickled in, or even okay, she's got, she's using contractions in one book, but in another one they use formal language. So I had to, just clean that up and make sure the continuity was there.
Yeah.
So that was a definite challenge.
Yeah, I think continuity, especially within a series, have you found it challenging to keep continuity within your Laura Creek novels, Dorothy?
Oh, yes, definitely. As Kenzie mentioned, people's names and how they spell them has become a problem, mainly because when you start writing a book, a lot of times you'll change somebody's name before the book's finished. I've done that to myself. It's a very funny joke to play on yourself, to change a character's name or how they spell it or where it came from. And you'll catch yourself when you read back again or when the editor goes through it, and it's like they'll ask you, well, who's this character? And you'll say, well, that's so-and-so. And they'll say, well, his name was James before, and now it's Charlie. So what are you doing? And you're not sure what you're doing. You don't remember. You blanked out. You had a blackout moment, and it just worked that way. You get so caught up in your own story, and you know these people so well that their name becomes an irrelevant issue. You're all about the destination, where they're going to end up, their interaction with everyone. And so a name takes on a face and a body, and it's not so much about their identity as their character that you get caught up in. And yes, it becomes a problem, and you do have to follow through. I've noticed that I make kind of a bibliography before I start a story, where I write down everybody's name and relationship to everyone in town, and who marries who, and where they came from, and so when I go back and write another one in the series, I already have a bibliography of how they're related to everybody back when. It's not necessarily a family tree. It's more of a who's who within that town. And
Right.
that has helped me a lot.
That's good. Yeah, I ended up with a character that I had introduced in like chapter 1, and then by the time we got the book written and it went through the editing, all of a sudden I realized that character never had a last name through the entire book. So I had to go back and put that in. Kind of like what we had to do with the dog in Class Reunion. Or no, Off the Clock. I had introduced the dog on the first page, and then I think we were 3 days from releasing the book when all of a sudden it dawned on me, where did the dog go? We saw him on page 1, and she goes back to the house several times. Where did the dog go? So we had to write in the dog.
Yeah.
I've read stories where they actually lose a character. I've read well-known authors. Well, they'll start out somewhere, and they'll have a character, and the character is throughout the book, and then all of a sudden they don't tie up that loose end at the end, and it's disconcerting. It's like, well, what happened to so-and-so? She's still in the hospital. How come?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, that's why it's important to have editors, and then there's times we'll go through it once and we get certain things, and then the second time we see other things, and then the third time, you get another one, and you'll say, "Oh, wait a minute, I don't know how I missed this, but what happened here?" And I can tell you, as an editor, that does frustrate me to no end when I've missed something that it was right in front of me, and how could I possibly miss that? But a lot of times you're focused on other things that are going on in the work that may not be working at that particular time. So it happens. There was another question I was going to ask both of you, but I'll go with this one because I don't remember the other one. And as my dad would say, if you don't remember, it's a lie.
It just wasn't that
It's just,
important.
no, it was a lie. But anyway, so my question, I was wondering, where could everybody find your stuff? Where do you have websites? Where can they be purchased? Do you have links that they can go to? Are you on Facebook? Obviously, you're on Twitter. Both of you are on Twitter. So where would they find you?
I have a website. Kenzie and I share a brain, so we also share a website. It's mollydaniels.wordpress.com. And they can also find me on Amazon. And Kenzie tweets. And I also have a Facebook page, which I think I have the grand total of 13 followers. What else am I on? I'm on LinkedIn.
Is it under Kenzie Michaels or Molly Daniels?
No, it's under Molly Daniels. Yeah. My main Facebook page that I use most often is Molly Daniels, and then I've got the two author pages, one for Molly and one for Kenzie. But Kenzie does all the tweeting, and yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as Molly Daniels too. And Amazon.com, you can find me as both. I think the author page is under Molly. And Goodreads, I'm on Goodreads as Molly Daniels, and Kenzie has a Goodreads too, but there's no picture, no interaction as Kenzie on there.
FreyasBauer.com, of course, has all of my books on there, which is great. Thank you very much. Amazon.com, ebooks, Kindle ebooks. I'm on there. All of my titles are up. And also Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, Kobo. I have a blog, which I keep up to date at dabellm3.wordpress.com, which I try desperately to keep up to date. There for a while, it was getting lost in the shuffle, but hopefully it's back up and running. And I do have a Facebook page. I have a page on Author Central on Amazon where you can look me up and check me out. I try very hard to keep up to date on Facebook and to do group posts in the romance groups to try to keep new things up and up to date and do some advertising and some posting. It's been difficult with the contemporary novel to introduce it. I was behind getting it out there when it released, but hopefully I'll get caught up one of these days, and it'll take flight. I have 2 more books with the editor that are on the queue. One's a Dance Hall Road follow-up on that story, and the other one is a brand new Oregon historical, and it's about a person who's been abused, and it takes place in the Willamette Valley during the early settling time, 1840s, around in there. Anyway, I look forward to those 2 things coming out new soon, and I'm very pleased with Freyas Bauer. They do a wonderful job. It's wonderful to have a fabulous editor like Sean Howe. She's a mentor, and she's wonderful support, and she's a beautiful resource for information. And Marcy and all of the people they put us in touch with have been extremely helpful. Couldn't have gotten anywhere without them. So I'm very happy. We have a package coming to the door.
That's your Molly. I got rid of that link to Freyas Bauer because it had your Zen cart ID. So you want to make sure that you only go up to the number. Which one was it that you looked up?
I just put the whole page up
Okay,
there.
so no, but I mean, was there a particular book that you looked up?
Oh, no, I just typed in Kenzie Michaels. And
Okay.
and and it took me
because
to the
what it
page.
did is it said Zen ID, and then it put your, and if someone were to click on that, they could get into your into your account. So I took it down. Okay. So I just so you're aware. So whenever you go up to, I'll give you an example. I'm gonna look up one of your books and post a link for it. Here, I'll just do it because this is on the front page. It's easy.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I was just going to post the front page.
I just
too.
posted that, but so it's Freyas Bauer, FREYAS, B as in boy, OWER.com. So here, see how it has. It's not doing it right because of the amp, but you see how it says products _ID equals, and then there's a number. After that number, you want to take everything off. So you don't want them to have that information. Let me see. So here we go down to the other information because you don't want them to get into your account here. So we'll go down to Kenzie Michaels, and here she is. Here you are. And this is a link to your so it doesn't say your name, but that's the link. So and I put the main page on there, and of course, Dorothy, you should have one as well. Let me see if I can find you. And it looks like it has. I don't think Dorothy's is up to date yet with her newest one. No, it's not even up to date with. I'm missing 3 on there, Dorothy. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
but they can. So here is yours. Oh, look at that. Kenzie Michaels is 89 and Dorothy is 88.
excellent. Okay. Very good.
So, well, I want to thank both of you for coming and chatting with me today and letting the audience get to know you a little bit better. Hopefully, they will check out your books. And I hope everybody who watched, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. And certainly, as I said, you can find both Kenzie and Dorothy on Facebook and Twitter, and on the WordPress, and also on Amazon, iTunes, Kobo, All Romancy Books, Omnilit, Barnes & Noble. Did I miss anything? Oh, and our own sites. My own site, Freyas Bauer, that's FREYAS, B as in boy, OWER.com. And I am Marcy Bond, and you can find me at marcybond.com. That's MARCI, B as in boy, AUN.com, N as in Nancy, not MN, .com, wildchildpublishing.com, FreyasBauer.com, and also I'm on Facebook under Marcy Bond and Twitter under Marcy Bond, and I'm on Google Plus and LinkedIn, and you can also find me at finallypublished.com. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week when I interview Kate Richards, the publisher of Decadent Publishing, and one of her authors, Desiree Holt, who is also an erotic romance author, just like Dorothy and Kenzie. And Kate does write as well. So thank you for joining in, and I hope to see you next week. And be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.